Hey guys, this is Pablo with Meditation Amsterdam. In today's video, we will be talking about the one thing that makes a yogi as opposed to just an asana practitioner or a spiritual person. And in order to explain the topic, I thought I would use the analogy of boats. And perhaps part of the reason for that is last weekend we had Sail Amsterdam for the first time in 10 years. And all these tall ships came into the harbor. It was quite a beautiful sight, actually. And one of the boats was actually a submarine from the Royal Navy here in the Netherlands, which was quite cool. So I would think that the analogy of boats can work for us in this video. And the main message, once again, if you're in a tremendous hurry, the main idea is how the average individual, the non-cultivated or non-cultivating individual, behaves like a regular boat that tries to best navigate the surface of the ocean. And in the case of the yogi behaves like a submarine. The yogi, he or she, goes for depth. And it's a very different exercise, and we will be explaining what we mean by depth. Another element in why this topic came to mind is I was at this members club the other day, and it's one of those things where members get to use facilities all over the world, and you see a bunch of sort of creative but also fairly successful people and so on. So I was looking around and getting an impression for how people who are part of these sort of successful, between quotes, environments behave and what they seem to prioritize. And rather than getting caught in the different flavors in which success can come and how these people roll, it is very, very obvious from looking around that there is an overt amount of external orientation to life. Everything is oriented outwards in terms of how attention is dealt, right? So regular people, and in this case these successful club members, orient their attention towards how they look, how they brand themselves. And in fact, there are courses about sustainable or long-term self-branding, their self-image, their personality, what they have to offer in terms of value, between quotes, as in, what is it that you bring to that crowd? Is it your looks? Is it your success? Is it your knowledge? Is it your vibe? Regardless of how refined that may be, in the sense of people who really do care about sustainability, for example, or charity or things of this kind, there is an overt amount of external orientation, which really caught my eye. And if I was to go back to the submarine analogy or the boat analogy, then I would say that as we look around, we come across all kinds of boats when it comes to people, right? And in this particular club, I would say that I came across people who are speedboats, for example, like one of those Riva speedboats, very fast. The up-and-coming artist, right? The startup or the scale-up entrepreneur. Those guys are the speedboats, right? They're really going for maxing out and burning a lot of fuel in the process. And by the way, nothing wrong with that, right? These are either personality traits or stages of life, but just for the sake of the analogy. Then you have yachts, right? Like big yachts. And these would be your people who are established, you could say, right? People who have kind of made it, and you can see that in the scale of what they move in terms of budgets, in terms of social connections, and so on, right? And The problem with speedboats and yachts is they don't get you very far in your yogic endeavors, in your self-cultivation endeavors. The reason for that is they all navigate on the surface of the water. Yeah. Now the speedboat, when things get choppy, it tries to either get away from the choppiness of the water, or maybe it uses its speed to cut through all these waves or something along those lines. The yacht will try to use its scale so that choppy water doesn't move it too much. Yeah. But none of them do the trick when it comes to real depth of cultivation. Even people who claim to be yogis, but which are in reality asana practitioners, yogic postures and hatha yoga practitioners, is not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is a real reversal of how attention is going, so that it stops leaking outwards towards things like social connections, status, personality, style, even our professional and emotional lives, if you will, and starts going inwards into the very depths of what it is that our being actually stands for, right? To connect with one thing. So the submarine, which is the yogi in this case, the real yogi, is someone who says, well, I see the surface of the water, right? My senses are pulling me towards the surface of the water all the time, and that's in the outside world. And my mind is pulling me towards the surface of my internal waters all the time. You see, so we get pulled by the senses in the outside world, and we get pulled by the mind in the inner world. But both of those are surface phenomena from the perspective of the Vedantin, or the true yogi, if you will, who is interested in realizing non-duality and the real true self. Because the real true self, as Advaita text will tell you, is attributeless. It can't be seen or even known. You can only be your true self, but from that vantage point, everything else is observed, including your emotions, your personality, your career, and all the things that we were mentioning earlier. Or even your asana expertise as a hatha yogi, for example, right? That's an external. It is external to the self, because it can be observed from the attributeless self that we actually are. And so, as you progress in your self-cultivation and the depth of your realization and the strength of your devotion towards self-realization increases, you will start to become less impressed and less interested by outward displays of whatever it may be, things that are seen on the surface of awareness, as opposed to going inwards and going, well, all this that I see around me is good and great, but so long as I don't know what it is that I am, nothing really matters, and I'm standing on very shaky ground. The speedboat will either burn itself out or crash, which, you know, I'm just following the analogy for the sake of it. The yacht consumes enormous amount of resources, and despite its size, it can still capsize, right? Look at the Titanic, right? One chip in that hull, placed correctly, can make the entire edifice of that vessel collapse. The submarine, on the other hand, is completely unaffected by surface level phenomena, and it is interested in finding the seabed where things are completely tranquil, whether there's a sunny day up on the surface or a storm. And what's interesting, of course, is that from that seafloor, you can be in touch with the surface, but you will no longer be moved by it. And this is a classic analogy in yogic literature of seeking the immovable depths of our real being, so that life circumstances and things that can be perceived either by the senses or our thinking mind no longer has the capacity to take us off center. So the yogi inverts the flow of attention away from leaking and darting outwards and into an almost obsessive exploration of what is it that I mean when I say I. Or as Nisargadatta Maharaj would say, what is the true import of I? What do I mean by it? I refer to myself as an entity all the time, but I have never really studied what kind of entity I am. Am I an entity at all? And coming to realize that this is by far the most fascinating question you could be asking yourself. And most people either don't ask the question or become satisfied with rather superficial answers to that question. I bet pretty much everything I have. Was I to walk back into that social club and start asking people, do you actually know who you are? They would all claim that they do. They would all say, yeah, man, I've been through a lot and now I know who I am. But they still talk about being a who, which kind of gives the game away, because ultimately, if we follow the Vedanta literature, we are not a who. We're not even a what. But we are, nevertheless. And it is that attributeless self that is the object of our search, if we can even call it an object. To the mind, it is an object. It will never be found as an object. But that is the kind of search that we're talking about. It's an absolutely fascinating process of discovery. And having practiced these arts and these philosophies for, I would say, over a decade and a half, it starts to become a sort of love affair with reality. And the search for the I, or the trying to understand what is it that I am, turns into a love affair with reality. Because in the ultimate analysis, and whenever we get glimpses of true non-duality in which the ego gets squeezed out of the picture, we come to realize that we are one with reality, that we are the very now, the very moment. And that moment has an apparent subject and object division, but in that division, an ego tries to squeeze itself and pretend that it is an entity that is separate from being and the capacity to know. Yeah. So the essence of this video is, I would say, not to see. You would think that I'm thereby discouraging people from joining social clubs or being successful, or God forbid, developing an interesting or successful personality. That is not the gist of this video. The gist of this video is to understand that while you may pursue all those things, and while you might even become a philosopher or a hatha yogi, and while you might feel that from a personality and emotional perspective and social perspective, you have realized who you are, the true yogi doesn't consider that a satisfying answer. Because the true yogi is not satisfied until true non-duality is fully realized. That we find our identity in the attributeless self, from which every single other thing out there, including our very own mind, is external, and we don't identify with that, or God forbid, with our physical body or with the social environment that we inhabit. And yet at the same time, and here comes the paradox of all these topics, once we have realized ourselves as the attributeless self, we become one with our thinking mind, our body, and our entire environment. So we are in fact more intimate with it, but never confusing it in a mental kind of way, which creates distance, fear, stress, and the hankering for external validation or success, which might do the trick for a certain turn of mind, or might do the trick for a while, but is ultimately something that does not satisfy the true yogi who wants to go for self-realization as part of the path. So that is the essence of today's video, and I'm very curious to hear what you guys make of it. As usual, if you think that this channel offers good content, do like, share, and subscribe. It gives us a push, makes the content more available to others out there that can also benefit from it. Thanks so far for listening, and I'll be back with more videos pretty soon. Cheerio, and bye-bye.